we have here Hannah, I just did it. Yeah, Hannah. Hannah Lund and Tiffany Nguyen presenting right now. Go for it, you two.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Hannah Lund.
And I'm Tiffany Nguyen, and today we are going to interpret the effects of Grants Pass v. Johnson on local California governments through the process of intergovernmental relations. So, really quick, can I get a raise of hands? How many homeless people do you think are in California? 50,000? 80,000? 100,000? 120,000? 150,000? Well, there are actually over 187,000 homeless individuals in California as of 2024. This is due to the common lack of shelter space availability, and oftentimes homeless people would partake in public camping, which refers to the temporary living establishment. So think tents, blankets and pillows, and even cardboard. So moving on to our research question, what are the implications of intergovernmental relations on local governments in California based on the ruling of Grants Pass v. Johnson? So this case started in October 2018, where John Logan and Gloria Johnson, two homeless individuals living in Grants Pass, Oregon, challenged the constitutionality of their city's municipal code, which prohibits public camping. This went up to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, in which they agreed with the plaintiffs, but this case went to the Supreme Court, ultimately ruling that it is now constitutional to criminalize public camping. So what does this mean? Well, the Grants Pass v. Johnson ruling overturned the ruling of Martin v. Boyce in 2018, which found that criminalizing public camping and sleeping where no alternative shelters were available violated the Eighth Amendment's cruel and unusual punishment clause, making it unconstitutional for local governments to arrest homeless individuals partaking in public camping.
So two terms we'll be using throughout the course of our presentation include APCO and the Eighth Amendment. Here, APCO is an acronym standing for Anti-Public Camping Ordinances, and you'll hear this a lot throughout our presentation. And next is the Eighth Amendment, which Tiffany referenced, and which includes the Cruel and Unusual Punishment Clause, protecting against excessive bail, excessive fines, and of course, cruel and unusual punishment.
A quantitative analysis was conducted examining changes in Southern California's municipal codes and ordinances made between June 2024 and April 2025. We found that a growing number of local governments have responded in support of the Supreme Court's ruling, whereas less local governments have responded in opposition. So the Grants Pass ruling has introduced a new layer of complexity to the ongoing homelessness crisis in California. Based on the research conducted, we found that through intergovernmental relations, IGR, homelessness policy is shaped by the Grants Pass v. Johnson ruling.
So as we introduce intergovernmental relations, we can begin at the federal level with the Supreme Court. So as Tiffany mentioned, the Supreme Court ruled that criminalizing public camping is now constitutional, as it does not constitute cruel and unusual punishment. But the court also wrote that nothing in their decision prevents local governments from going ahead and declining to criminalize public camping. So this means that governments now have the authority to decide if and how they would like to criminalize public camping.
So we've been hearing a lot about intergovernmental relations, but what exactly is it? A term invented in the 1930s, intergovernmental relations summarizes the extensive relationship between local, state, and federal governments and their relations, including officials entrusted with implementing and shaping legislative policies. So this sounds a lot like federalism, but what exactly is the difference? While federalism places an emphasis first on federal-state relationships, IGR focuses on encompassing all the interactions among over 87,000 units of government present within the American political system, including, but not limited to, state, local, interlocal, and state national.
So for our methods, we examined numerous different homelessness policies across California state and local governments, including municipal codes and ordinances. So beginning at the state level, we're seeing Executive Order N-124 issued by Governor Newsom just roughly a month after the Grants Pass ruling. And this is demanding that local governments reduce their homeless populations their homeless encampments or face funding withholding. An example of this funding is a Homeless Housing Initiative and Prevention, Round 6, which provides over $760 million to regions in California to address their homelessness. But again, this funding can be withheld if regional goals are not met. So here, we're seeing the state demand local governments do something about their homelessness crises, and we're also seeing these local governments use their newfound authority provided by the Grants Pass ruling to meet these demands. And so from this, the Grants Pass ruling is kind of trickling down from the federal level, starting at the Supreme Court, down to the state government, and now down to these local levels.
So since the 2024 Grants Pass ruling, what have California local governments done with their newfound authority on criminalizing public camping? We see that in San Clemente, they updated the city's APCO to match the court's ruling, similarly whereas they previously matched the ruling of Martin v. Boyce. In Newport Beach, they published a new APCO that bans sleeping publicly in places and in cars overnight. And in Fresno, they prohibited camping on any public property with penalties including up to a year in jail and $1,000 in fines per violation. And in San Joaquin Valley, they actually brought in their APCO to include prohibiting individuals from public city sleeping in a same location for more than an hour. So we know that less local governments have responded in opposition, including LA Mayor Karen Bass, who issued a response criticizing the Supreme Court's ruling.
So while we have seen these ordinances try to address communities' homeless populations through Grants Pass, the reality of actually enforcing the ruling looks a bit different. An example we have here is from the city of Fresno concerning Wiki Two Hands, was a homeless man recently arrested for public camping. And he was supposed to be the first person tried for Fresno's new APCO issued after Grants Pass, but his case was ultimately dismissed because the city failed to prosecute in time. And so here we're seeing local governments use the threat of arrest to impact homeless people to reach certain goals. And again, these local governments are trying to meet the state's demands and using the authority provided by Grants Pass to do so. So for our analysis, our methods demonstrated how local governments are responding to the Grants Pass ruling, but we wanted to find out also why certain governments are responding differently than others. So we conducted an analysis and a study of Southern California counties, and these reflect the overall changes and effects among California local governments. So we see here in this map, it's a map of the number of homeless people per county in Southern California counties according to the 2020 census. We see here LA County with the highest amount, followed by Orange and San Diego counties. And this in comparison to the number of APCO issued per county, not necessarily by the county government, but by local governments within the county. And so we see Orange and San Diego counties with the highest amount, followed by Riverside, but not Los Angeles. So what do these graphs tell us about local government behavior? Well, we found that there is not a direct relationship between the size of a county's homeless population and the number of APCO they issue. As we saw with LA County that has the highest homeless population at over 56,000 people, but not the highest number of APCO. So if the size of the homeless population is not the sole determining factor in this, then what are the other factors playing a role in this process? We found that among the different factors playing a role, political ideology and unity, as well as public safety and crime concerns are notable. So beginning with political ideology as a factor, we have found that APCO are generally more favored by Republicans and generally more opposed by Democrats, as we saw earlier with LA Mayor Karen Bass, who's a Democrat, issuing a response criticizing the ruling. But ultimately, we have found that ideology only somewhat supports determining APCO. It is not a driving factor, but it is one of the many factors. So next is political unity as a factor. And here, with political unity, we're referring to a closeness of political attitudes and views, also as an antonym to political polarization. So we found that LA has a higher political unity because there's a greater majority voting for a particular candidate rather than there being a closer, like 50-50 margin. And so you can see here with this chart, comparing the variables of political unity and the size of homeless populations, and how safety and crime concerns is a factor. So in general, higher crime rates are associated with higher population densities, and higher population densities can be found in counties like Orange County, San Diego, and Riverside, which have issued more APCO. But again, LA County is an outlier, it's not reflected here, as it has an extremely high population density, but again, it does not have a high number of APCO issued. So overall, we have found that the degree to which APCO are issued is influenced by many factors and different degrees of these factors as well, including political ideology, political unity, public safety and crime concerns, and the size of the homeless population. So our results found that overall, more local governments in California have chosen to respond in favor of the Supreme Court's ruling, with less local governments directly opposing the ruling and issuing this through policy. And we have found that as a result of grants passed, distinct homeless policies are issued and passed down in advance through these different levels of government, including the state. And through intergovernmental relations, homelessness policy and ultimately the lives of homeless people will be shaped by the grants passed ruling between these different relationships of government.
So moving on to looking ahead, is grants passed a solution to homelessness? So thus far, the ruling has not proved an equitable and long-term solution to homelessness. In fact, it was never meant to. The ruling simply provided local governments to implement policies that criminalize public camping. But incarceration does not provide the resources and opportunities for homeless people to re-enter and reestablish themselves into society as part of the working class. As a matter of fact, it restricts them with a criminal record, making it harder for them to reestablish themselves in society. So as long as the federal, state, and local governments prioritize criminalization over providing housing, rehab, and job opportunities, the cycle will continue. Through intergovernmental relations, we see that the grants passed v. Johnson case has trickled down and dispersed among the local California governments and thus perpetuates this very cycle. So with that, I would like to thank you all for your time.